Okay, so Severance Season 2 is finally complete, and this show is absolutely remarkable. Do you see what I did there? Remarkable, mark, do you get it? Okay, maybe I need to eradicate some of that childish folly from my essence, but you get my point. Severance remains one of the most captivating, unique, and well-made series in recent years. This short video will obviously be chock full of spoilers as I go over my raw, immediate thoughts, having literally just finished watching Season 2's final episode. And whew, what a bloody finale that was. Quite literally too. There's select few shows that compel me to immediately feel the need to share my burgeoning thoughts on them, because I quite simply can't stop thinking about it otherwise. But this is one of them, so I urge you to watch it if you haven't already, and if you have, then let's discuss. So to start with, I want to talk about our main men, Mark. Adam Scott's defining performance continues to drive the show as he masterfully switches between our two protagonists, who are both more emotional, confrontational, and fired up with purpose than last time out, as their lives become increasingly entangled. I see a lot of people, deservedly so, praising the supporting cast, but I feel like I see surprisingly less of that for Scott, without whom the show would just fundamentally fail to function. It's Mark's story we're bought into, and that becomes increasingly clear throughout the season as it's revealed that Mark is not a small cog as part of some larger Lumen plan as I originally estimated, but rather their evil schemes explicitly revolve around him and his wife Gemma. I do like this unexpected divergence in direction, though it does create more questions than it answers, both plot-related and sadly plot-hole related. Like, if Mark is the linchpin to Lumen's plans, why is he given such freedom to fuck around? I guess they're trying to keep him happy inside. But as for his outie, surely their surveillance would quickly uncover anything suspicious he's up to, like, I don't know, reintegrating his two selves? Which is another failing of the season for me. I thought reintegration was going to be a far bigger deal, as it seems the two Marks would imminently become one. But this could have been cut out of the season and little would be different. I guess the only consequence is that Mark's seizure results in them calling in Miss Cobell, which in itself is horrifically out of character and a ridiculously stupid thing for one of my favourite characters, Devon, to do. They weren't to know she was off elsewhere having an arc to conveniently turn her against Lumen. But just stay with me here while we're briefly complaining. My other biggest concern with the season is that they've almost become victims of their own success, in that it's like both halves of the show are to me compelling enough to occupy a full series worth of time of their own accord, so consequently it feels like both innies and outies are fighting it out over limited screen time, and their storylines can therefore occasionally appear a little rushed, as one half has to make room for the other. With so many narratively dense, packed plotlines to squeeze in, certain characters get left by the wayside as the show begins to feel slightly overcrowded with both people and plot lines, some of which they simply don't have time to satisfactorily attend to this season. But even for the main cast themselves, when you go several weeks hardly seeing Innie, Mark, and by extension Dylan and Helly, you're missing what was at one stage the primary driving force of the show. There's just a lot going on in Season 2 and they strike the difficult balance between plotlines well enough. But for me, some aspects end up a teensy bit half-baked, like Mark's reintegration as an example. I know it seems I'm starting pretty negative, but the show is so good. I only have a handful of misgivings and I wanted to air them out early. Plus, frustration that I'm left wanting more is hardly the worst thing, and these minor annoyances are exactly that, minor. Despite them, Mark as a protagonist continues to be one of the most interesting and dynamic oddities I've seen on television, and he's complemented perfectly this season by another fascinating character in Helena Egan. Having a central character turn out to be a villain on the outside is such an obvious twist, yet one that struck me dumb with its brilliance in Season 1. But they again keep you guessing by providing insight and depth into what transpires to be a far more complicated character than I initially assumed from last season. I called that Helena was pretending to be Helly from the outset because it made the most sense, and when my suspicions were vindicated a few episodes later, it was still a satisfactorily dramatic twist because of how it affects the other characters, specifically Irving. An unexpected consequence of this season is that Helena has quickly become one of the most interesting characters to me. Because this pretty clearly isn't all a performance, it's like she gets to enjoy herself unburdened from the pretense of Helena Egan for the first time in her life. What she does is despicably reprehensible, yet you cannot help but sympathize with her and suspect she has some feelings towards Mark, and I'm really looking forward to where Helena's journey will take her next. But as for Helly herself, she doesn't have too dramatic an arc this time around. This season is more about strengthening the connection between her and Innie Mark that has such damning consequences at the death, as the ramifications of sharing a body with another person, driven by their own wants and needs, finally catch up with Mark. But the main impetus for this season overall is rescuing Mark's wife Gemma, who was previously assumed dead, and uncovering the mystery of why Lumen have held her captive. That second question we don't really understand yet, but it doesn't really matter, though I couldn't help but feel that while watching, certain mysteries like this are being a bit dragged out at this point, where characters talk in riddles and don't get asked the questions they logically would, since mysteries have to be upheld because it's a TV show. Like, there's no reason Mark and Devon wouldn't immediately learn everything they could from Cobell, but for the viewer's sake, information is withheld, which is frustrating. But you quickly forget this as you're swept off your feet by a whirlwind of twists and turns every time such frustrations arise, that just about distract you from the brink of the show starting to lose that all-important balance between intrigue and empty setup. I think this season is just a bit messier than the first, which is absolutely understandable as things begin to unravel. And they get away with it here because the brilliant parts are so good, they hold up the messier parts. But it's just something to think about for season 3, because mystery for mystery's sake isn't interesting. But thankfully, those aforementioned brilliant, characterful, insightful moments and payoffs very much are. One such example is pretty much the entirety of episode 7, where questions are at last answered yet intriguing new ones set up, as we finally see what happened to Gemma while also getting an insight into her and Mark's life before Lumen. This episode is painstakingly beautiful and a welcome insight into an individual that we've heard so much about yet never actually seen. I mentioned Adam Scott's incredible ability to play two so obviously similar yet distinct characters, and in this episode he's almost playing a third version of Mark, one that we see glimpses of, but is otherwise buried by the grief he feels for Gemma, who is similarly brought to life impeccably by Deechin Lackman. Character-wise, I think this is my favourite episode of the season, though in terms of the pure batshit craziness we love to see from Severance, episode 4 takes the cake.
This is the tallest waterfall on the planet.
This is where shit really starts to hit the fan for the first time, as Milchick's disastrous Ortbow falls apart before our eyes in quite a Lynchian, horror-inspired fashion, resulting in the return of Helly and the death of Irving's Innie, after he is the only one to discover the truth about Helena's deception. I love Irving, and this felt like the right time to say goodbye to him. I'm just gonna keep repeating myself because all the performances are spectacular, but John Turturro is analogously exceptional. His outie gets more focused thereafter as we see the heartbreaking resolution to his romance with Bert, who frankly saves his life in more ways than one. Their Innie's feelings towards each other, despite both being retired, transcending the chip and breaking forth into the real world in a touching yet tragic fashion. Also, let these two old dudes snog, you cowards. Also, can I just say here, though I'm sure you'll have noticed already, this is one of the best looking shows out there, with such a unique and purposeful composition style, visual language and colour palette, where each shot is beautifully, laboriously constructed, so that each one is teeming with meaning and character. But to return to said characters, I think Dylan probably gets the least dramatic story of the main four, but through him they continue to play with the mind-boggling dynamics of Innie's mixing with people from the outside and vice versa. Examining the effect that has on people's lives and relationships is one of those core points of interest of the show, and it's always entertaining and thought-provoking when they delve into the harsh realities of having the severance procedure. The other character worth mentioning is of course Miss Cobell, who sadly is my least favourite of the bunch. And that doesn't mean she's a bad character by any stretch. I very much enjoy her involvement in the story, but I think she works best as this enigmatic epitome of Lumen's mysteriousness, when taken seriously and of her own accord, not as an obstruction to said mystery. She doesn't really work for me and can come across a bit silly. Despite having her own full episode in which they attempt to flesh her out, I think she's an another character who has still got more to prove to get me on side, with still more questions than answers, which kind of adds to the rushed, overcrowded feeling of the season. But the reveal of her creation of the Severance procedure provides the necessary motivation for her to help Mark. But I'd hope a lot more is revealed both by and about her next time round, because despite her backstory, I still think her actions don't yet seem justified, but I'm glad she has her imperative place in the overarching narrative nevertheless. And oh my god, I can't believe I nearly forgot Mr. Milchick. Tremel Tillman is as captivating as ever with what is honestly a powerhouse performance. Milchick has so much to do this season, like literally look at how much he's having to run around to get stuff done. And through all the turmoil he endures, we begin to see some chinks in his armor, resulting in one of the most satisfying scenes of the season. I hope we get to see more of Miss Huang next time round to help inform us on how Lumen creates these absolute weirdos like Milchick who work there, while he hopefully continues on his enthralling journey of realizing that work is just work. Plus, just when I assumed there was no hope of it as we approach the super serious finale, Milchick busts out those dance moves yet again and it's spectacular. I absolutely adore the absurdly comedic tone this show just intermittently adopts at random points, as it simultaneously takes itself incredibly seriously and then suddenly doesn't at all, and it's so good.
He dumb?
No.
He a dick?
No.
Was that Sudoku?
And speaking of said finale, I think it really effectively wraps up what could have otherwise been a somewhat messy season. But like I said, you don't care about that in the slightest when we're barreling towards such a thrilling and well-executed climax. Like having that marching band, while at first comedic, goes so hard as the persistent drumming rhythmically pounds on while the tension and action crescendos, providing a real sense of momentum to the concluding episode. We also get to explore some more of those fascinating innie-outie dynamics as Mark finally gets to have a conversation between his two selves, while the viewer is stuck in the middle wanting what's best for both characters, while knowing they now can't coexist and one of them has to lose everything, whether it's his wife or his life. It's exhilarating as we return to Lumen, second-guessing what Mark will do with this impossible choice. And the sequence where he ventures down to rescue Gemma is genius, edge-of-your-seat stuff as he switches from innie to outie and back again, before innie Mark eventually makes the ultimate betrayal after saving Gemma, who now has to watch her husband, who she's finally been reunited with, run away with someone else. Yet you can't help but feel that innie Mark's choice is completely justified from his perspective. We're torturously on both sides, yet have to watch hopelessly as neither one fully wins. Outie Mark is kept from his wife by his innie, while his innie has served his purpose for Lumen and doesn't know what fate awaits him and Helly. Yet as they run away into that endless corridor sunset, neither of them care, because they have each other in that moment and that moment alone. With this liminal final image already taking its place as an iconic, unforgettable symbol of the show. Like Helly says, they're given half a life and Lumen doesn't expect them to fight for it. Mark makes the exact same mistake. Yeah, this show's just a bit good. I can't stop thinking about it, and I already cannot wait for Season 3. Because without getting too ahead of myself, if it keeps up the electrifying intrigue, riveting characters, doesn't overstay its welcome, and satisfactorily solves its mysteries, then within its genre, Severance has serious GOAT potential. Thank you so much for watching. I don't know if anyone will be watching this and still waiting for the delayed Halo Infinite review. If you are, sorry. I just got it badly wrong with how long it would take to finish, and then life got in the way. I've ultimately ended up reworking large parts I wasn't fully satisfied with, but it's nearly there, and this video was something fun to make in the meantime, to briefly chat about an excellent show I'm passionate about, because it really is a remarkable piece of TV that I was desperate to discuss. Cheers, I'll see you in a bit.